What's up, Ada Gang? Welcome into Dapp Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. As a part of today's video, I'm sitting down for an interview with Stephen Ward, the CEO and the founder of VyFi, one of the fastest growing DEX this year within the Cardano ecosystem, to discuss their Plutus V3 integrations. And if you aren't aware, Plutus V3 is fresh off the press. I believe they may be the first DEX to actually use Plutus V3. In addition, we talk about their brand new SafeSwap feature, which allows for OTC trades to take place within the Cardano ecosystem. And it also doubles as a distribution mechanism or distribution platform. And then we'll also talk about their upcoming Liquidity Manager and their brand new user interface, or their reboot of their user interface, including a dashboard. Now, of course, Steven does sprinkle a little bit of alpha in there as well, so definitely make sure to stay tuned in. But that'll do it here for the intro. As always, if you've enjoyed this type of content, or if you do enjoy this type of content, please smash that thumbs up on the way in. If you want more, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to voice off down below. That said, enjoy today's interview. What's up, Ada Nation? Welcome into Dapp Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. My name's Fareed. As a part of today's video, we're diving into VyFi, and we're talking about Plutus V3 smart contracts, which are now being deployed as we speak on their platform. Of course, I'll be joined by Steven, the CEO and the founder of the platform. Without any further ado, let me go ahead and bring him up. Steven, it's been a minute. How are you?
Has been. How you doing, mate? I'm really well, thank you. And yourself?
I am good. Can't complain. It's finally springtime here where I'm at. We're seeing Cardano adoption, on the rise. I cannot
Yeah.
ask for more. How have you been over there on the Gold Coast?
Oh, that's Pete Bowie. I'm down in Melbourne. It's been boiling though, same as the Gold Coast. We've been really hot every single day. So I've just been trying to stay indoors and not melt while working.
Yeah,
It's
no,
it's
I
too
I
hot
hear you.
here, man.
I hear you. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm interested in visiting. Hopefully after the bull market wraps up. But definitely excited to have you on here and to be able to get some of your time, given how far across the globe you are there. So now that we've got sort
Thank
of the
you.
introductions and the small talk out of the way, right? Let's maybe just dive right on in here. There's a lot of upgrades surrounding Plutus V3 and integrations on that front. But before we
Mhm.
go any further, again, it's been a minute. For anybody who's maybe seeing you here on the channel for the first time, or who hasn't heard of VyFi, can we get a brief overview of what you guys offer? And then we'll dive into some of the more recent updates and progress.
Absolutely. So look, we have been around the Cardano ecosystem now for 4 years almost. It's actually crazy how fast time is moving. Um, And we've basically designed a DeFi suite, and we're building out that DeFi suite to help users engage with liquidity and liquidity management on the Cardano blockchain. So we are a DEX, and right now you can go to our DEX, app.vyfi.io. We also do a lot of vaulting and token staking for different projects across the ecosystem, such as Daddy or Kopi or Noom. And users can come to our platform. They can use these services that already exist, and they have it right there. You've got the DEX, you've got the Vault, and of course, we've also got our bar. And this was the first ever distributive mechanism that was designed on Cardano, and it's built into our smart contracts on our DEX. And what we essentially do is we take 0.1% of the fees of every trade that takes place in our DEX, and we use that to buy back VyFi from the market and distribute it to holders of VyFi. So this system was initially released almost 2 years ago now, and we're really excited to be able to bring our V3 update. This is sort of, I would say, maybe even the biggest step that's taken place, certainly for our DEX, but certainly a massive step forward for the blockchain writ large. And we'll be talking about why that's the case through this conversation, of course, and the advantages that Plutus V3 provide. But one of the big things that I just want to mention before we jump into it is that this really allows us to bring out a lot of products at fairly decent speeds and a large scale. And we'll be talking about this as we go further down the line about how we've sort of implemented V3. But we're super excited to be able to be bringing the first of those products, which is called SafeSwap, which is going to be the first ever V3 product on the Cardano chain. I believe we should be launching it next week. And this we're doing in conjunction with Dedium, and they're doing it, and they're setting it up to actually manage large-scale distributions to their Dedium community of Cardano without having to run an airdrop every single time. And we can talk a little bit about the SafeSwap system and how that's working as well, but we're now essentially we've hit the point that the first V3 contacts are going to be hitting the chain, and they're going to be arriving within the next few weeks.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Yeah, I think that's probably a good segue into SafeSwap. So for anybody who maybe doesn't understand, I think generally speaking, airdrops have a bad rep. There's obviously a cost associated with that. But for anybody who doesn't understand SafeSwaps, can you maybe break down, what they are and what problem they solve with the current, way that people are handling distributions or airdrops?
Absolutely. And it actually solves more than one problem. SafeSwaps are kind of a really interesting design. Because of the power that we get inside of V3, we're able to implement this design in multiple ways to give us lots of products that aren't available on the chain currently. So before we get into the more complex distribution one, let's just start with why it's called a SafeSwap. These are essentially an escrow contract. And for those that don't know what escrow is, it's a service whereby a third party, generally in traditional finance, will ascertain that a buyer and a seller both have the assets that they say they do before they conduct the transaction to swap, right? And this is really important, particularly when you're dealing with large trades, because if you've got $2 million on one side and you've got a mansion on the other, you want to make sure that the person selling the mansion is the person that owns the mansion. Similarly, you want to make sure the person buying the mansion has the $2 million. It's a lot of money. So when we're dealing on the Cardano blockchain at the moment, we currently don't have a function to do what are called safe OTCs, which are over-the-counter trades. So over-the-counter is OTC. And what this means is that if a user were to do a private trade with another user, they essentially have to trust that the other user has what they say they have. And a classic example of this would be, for example, buying an NFT through Discord. And I think if you've been a trader on any blockchain for some time, you've probably bought an NFT through Discord at some point in your sort of career, right? Or when you're looking at a new project that's starting up and you want to get involved early and you want to give a private investment to the project, right? These are two really obvious cases where you want someone to confirm that, yes, we've got both assets on both sides before the swap actually completes. And this is what a SafeSwap does. You'll just come to our SafeSwap front end, you put in the receiving address, you put in the asset that you want and how much of that asset you want, and then on the top, you put in your address. Well, your address is already there. You don't need to put it in. Sorry, you're logged in with your address. But you can actually change it to another address if you want the person to make the transaction in the first place to be another address. So that's why the field is there. But you put your address is automatically there. You would put in, let's say, 500 Cardano. The asset on the other side could be a VyFi Gold NFT, right? And then your 500 Cardano is sent to the smart contract. When the person that's buying it off you comes to our site, they get a notification saying you have a request for a SafeSwap. And then it shows them you need to submit this NFT for this Cardano. They can accept or they can deny. If they accept, builds the transaction, sends the gold NFT into the smart contract, and then it swaps it between both parties. And then both parties can receive it. Now, what this essentially means is that you can now do an escrowed trade on Cardano, which is a function that has just been missing from the chain. That is just a base level function that we need to be able to have to allow people to do OTC and large scale OTC. So the cost of using it's going to be very low. It's pretty much the exact same cost as doing an airdrop. So 1.4 ADA, I believe it is. And what's really interesting is that when you set up the SafeSwap, you can actually split the fees between the users. So there's a little slider that says, do you want to spend the whole 1.4 for the fee, or do you want that 1.4 to be split, or do you want to pay 30% and 70% goes to the other side? And the reason I mention that is because this becomes really important for the next step, which is the distribution system. So we can set up a SafeSwap that essentially has the other side of the purchase being a zero value. So that means that I have set up another wallet to accept this token that I'm depositing in exchange for $0. So they just have to conduct a transaction, they'll receive those tokens. But what that essentially becomes at that point is a distribution. Because if I want to give something out to somebody else, I can set it up on the SafeSwap so that there's the smart contract that has the asset sitting in there that's going to deliver that asset to the user that comes and claims it, which can only be the wallet that they've set to be the claim, right? So you've suddenly just got a distribution. And we've actually built this system by implementing our transaction cart and by implementing a few really nice data managing features in Plutus v3. We've been able to implement this so anyone can actually build a CSV, deposit that CSV to our transaction builder. It turns it into a transaction for the smart contract. And then the smart contract can set up bulk distributions of whatever asset you want to whatever wallets you want to do. And this is actually going to be a public feature. Anyone will be able to do it, any project. They don't even need to ask us. There's just going to be the import feature there with instructions of how to set up the CSV. And that means that you could set up 5,000 wallets, and you could even set it up so that the fee distribution isn't necessarily all the user, right? Because if you have 5,000 users to airdrop, that's 8,000 Cardano almost, right? Let's say I'm happy to put 2,000 Cardano towards it to help out on the feeds and make more users engage and make it easier for them to engage. With our slider system, as the project, I could actually say, okay, I want to cover 0.5 ADA of each of these, and the user covers 0.8, right, or 0.9, whatever it is. And you can determine how you want that fee to be split. So the project, if they want, they could have the user pay entirely for that airdrop, right, or for that distribution to them and pay the full 1.4, or they could pay half, or they can cover it on behalf of the user, right? It's entirely up to the project how they want that to be charged. And it also allows, for the first time on Cardano, to do mass distributions of the Cardano token based on whatever rules you want, right? Because the CSV is based on a snapshot of the list of wallets, so we can help you set up any gate you want. Do you want it to be hold your NFT? Do you want it to be people that hold your NFT and are also staking inside a vault and also hold this much of your token? Whatever gates you want to provide as a reward, we're able to set that up and organize a distribution to whoever meets those parameters.
Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting feature. And from a stake pool operator's perspective, I know that people do a lot of ISPOs, and that, even just outside of ISPOs, stake pool operators want to show their delegators that they appreciate them. And I think a tool like this is the perfect tool to go ahead and do that. Again, with the flexibility, the ability to sort of identify who pays the fees, and then any sort of prerequisites that might need to be met before they can actually claim. So interesting feature there. And obviously, thank you for sharing that. You mentioned timeline sometime early next week. As we're shooting this, it's the 10th of February. When can the community expect for this to hit the main net? Is it already on the
I'm
test
not going to say early next week. I want to say next week. We're currently doing a lot of testing right now. Another thing I want to add is that I believe this is going to be open source as well. So it is going to be available for other people to play around with and have a look at. And we also are launching this initially with Dedium. So Dedium are actually implementing this for their community to begin with. And it's going to be offered to anyone on our site that's using a vault. So functionally, the Dedium community at the moment can already stake their Dedium to earn a reward. They have a time-locked vault on VyFi, and any user that's staked inside that vault is also going to be receiving this bonus reward that is a distribution from the Dedium community. From the Dedium project. And this bonus reward comes through as Cardano and is essentially going to be added. I believe it's going to be once a month, but don't hold me to that. We're still working out some details on it. To the user's ability to the user's claim, right? They're essentially going to get a SafeSwap request for them to spend $0 or just the fees to claim that Cardano every month on our site. And that's going to be the first implementation that we do with Daddy. But again, this is public. So exactly like you said, any SPO operator that wants to set this up for their community, right? All they need to do is have a snapshot of the wallets that meet the criteria that they want. And if you run a stake pool, I'm pretty sure that's as easy as just like drop, drag, and copy, and then put in the amount of reward that you want to give them, and then you just upload it to our import. We've got a button on the top left-hand corner of SafeSwap that says import file. You upload it, and then using our transaction cart, the transaction is going to get built, and you can push that through to those people and just tell them, go onto VyFi now, and your reward's available. You don't even need to talk to us, right? And then the next time those users go onto VyFi, boom, their reward's going to be there.
I like that. Permissionless as it should be in this blockchain and crypto space. Stephen, let's keep the conversation rolling here. I know that we've teased and we've talked about offline here, Plutus V3, and sort of what those enhancements bring to the chain.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
from a DEX perspective, can you maybe recap and highlight what stands out to you guys and what you guys have been able to take advantage of in this latest round of updates?
Absolutely, so much. The one that we're most excited about is SIP 85, which is one that I feel like isn't being spoken about very much because everyone's kind of just ignored it because it was too hard to implement into the Plutus V3 integration of Icon. What SIP 85 is it allows data types. And data types functionally allow us to reference different types of requests within the smart contract, right? So I don't need to have like a strict set of data that I'm basing this off. I'm able to change my reference based on my requirements. Any engineers out there, don't kill me too heavily. But let me give you a real world example of how this works. Let's take a look at safe swaps. Sorry, safe swaps. I was just talking about those. Sorry, stable swaps. Now, if you go to Wing Riders or you go to MinSwap, they've currently got stable swaps on their decks. On the back end, though, it's much more complex than just having stable swaps and having normal swaps. Because the way that the system works for Cardano at the moment is I've got a validator that has to run those transactions that are being requested. And my validator has to essentially run transactions for a normal swap. It can't do a normal swap and a stable swap. So I functionally need to build an entire new validator that validates stable swaps and functionally build an entire second DEX. And then on the front end, I integrate them so that I've got stable swaps and normal swaps together on our front end. But functionally, I've got two separate DEXs on the back end, one for running normal swaps, one for running stable swaps. Now, by implementing these data types, we're able to actually put multiple type of pools into a single smart contract. And then based on the execution of the data, we're able to tell it, no, we're going to execute with this line of code. So you're going to execute with these formulas. And that means that our validator now can be a single validator that does normal swaps, stable swaps, concentrated liquidity, balancer pools. We can functionally add any types of formula that we want for a liquidity pool, and we can essentially implement it into our DEX like Lego, right? Because we can just slot it into our validator by creating a new data type that references those formulas. Now, this is something that currently is impossible on any other DEX, including those that are building Plutus V3 and Icon, right? Because Icon doesn't implement SIP85. So, I mean, we've had to do a lot to be able to make this implementable. But everything that we've done, we want to be making public and bringing out not just open source, but also talking to the public and showing to other engineers so other engineers can take advantage of this research and building that we've done. So that's one of the first really big ones is data types. You know, that is the one that I would say is the largest. There's efficiencies saved with optimizations in size, transaction size. As an example, just recently, Goofy Crisp put out a tweet which was comparing all the DEXs. And it was really interesting to see that and thinking to myself how it's all going to change for us when the V3 is launched. But functionally, at the moment, every time the DEX validator submits a transaction, it costs about between 0.5 and 0.6 Cardano is sort of the cost for the validator to submit the transaction. With our Plutus V3, that's getting down to 0.17 Cardano. So we're reducing that by 60, 70, 65, 70%, right? And that reduction is savings that we're going to be able to pass directly on to the client, to the customer, because we can still make the exact same profit margin while the customer pays 0.4 Cardano less for every trade.
That's good. No, I'm just thinking about what you mentioned in that post about Goofy Crips, and I actually did see that on my feed as well, and just sort of looking at the landscape and what we're currently accustomed to, right? Having to pay the batcher fees, the swap fees, the oil, however you want to sort of call that. But as we're starting to see these enhancements, we're starting to see a reduction in the fees and then just more efficiency, as you just mentioned there, right? Where you no longer have to set up two nodes to do two different types of formulas depending on the type of swap. You're now able to sort of keep everything on one node. And with SIP number, I think you said 85 or 83,
Correct.
that gives
SIP
you that
85.
flexibility. You know, so from an interoperability standpoint, I think that's a really, really big step forward. And I'm hopeful that we can get all the DEXs in the ecosystem to adopt that standard right? To where everybody and anybody can take a hold and be able to experience some of those efficiencies or some of those benefits there.
The optimization here is massive. I mean, we're talking a 95% optimization on the required code base to be able to execute. And the big thing about this is that we want to be going out there and explaining to engineers how we do this and showing them how we did this so that they can start implementing these powerful tools in also improving the Cardano ecosystem writ large, right? Like if you can take the construction time for a lending platform from 80,000 lines of code to 2,000 lines of code, right? All of a sudden, you're going to be able to do fast, more significant improvements on your ability to create more advanced technology on your lending platform, or change that from a lending platform to an insurance platform, pick anything, right? The tools that we've created should create a far more efficient pathway for people to be able to build complex systems on Cardano. And we just are really excited to be able to bring this to the public and to show everyone after this is released how we did it, what we've done, and help people implement it themselves.
Yeah, and I'm sure other developers and other dexes are excited to see that, right? Because again, I think this levels up and just really raises the entire sort of standard within the ecosystem alone. Now, you guys aren't just revamping and including Plutus v3 from a backend perspective and a validator perspective. You guys are also taking the time to redo the front end, if I'm not mistaken, right? So you guys have redesigned or are in the process of redesigning right now. What can you give us in terms of that update?
Yeah, so we got so much happening with our front end. So first, we're building out the dashboard, and we're really excited about this dashboard because it really, I think, allows users to build out a trading flow that fits them. And this really is born from my time spent as a trader. I was working in a hedge fund for quite some time and dealing with trading platforms, as by nature, that was my day in, day out. And one of the big things that trading platforms have, particularly in a professional setting, but even in a trading view setting, right? You don't need to have a professional platform like CMC Markets to be able to do it. You can customize where things are located on your screen, and you can bring up different information panels that you need when you need them. And then you can place that information where you want on your screen and then essentially draw on it when you need. So we're functionally building a dashboard that allows users to customize their trading page to be how they want it to be. So you could bring in 4 different charts. You can bring in the 4 different trading boxes for each of those charts. So rather than having to go to DEX and then selecting the coins that you want on each side and then submit or put into the transaction cart, select the next, put into the transaction cart. If you know you're trading 10 coins regularly, just have your trading page with those 10 right there, and then have 5 charts and then swap between the 10, for example, because I don't know if you'll be able to fit 10 on a single page. So that might be a bit hectic. You might need 2 screens for that. But then functionally, you'll just be able to look at the charts, engage with the trading boxes straight away right there in front of you, and bring in the data that you need as you need it to be able to engage. So we're going to have data from Cerberus. Now, I should add, not all of these little applications are going to be there available on launch. We're building a lot of them. At the moment, we've got about 12 different screens that you can drag on for data, and we're aiming to get that to about 20. And that includes liquidity stuff for our Liquidity Manager, which we'll hopefully talk about in a moment. That includes price management tools. That includes looking at charts, looking at different technical analysis or different technicals, working with Cerberus to implement token analysis, so you can actually access a token analysis directly in front of you of a token that you're interested in. And then you can look at it with the chart right next to it, whilst you've got the trading box right below you. And then you've got the depth of market on the other side to see what orders are there, right? So all of a sudden, we've taken what you would classically see in a trading platform, like a proper trading platform, and we're trying to give you that experience, to give you those tools to manage your trades on a DEX.
Yeah, and that's important here because quality of life, I think, is what comes after you get like the base or the core functionality, right? And I feel like the last year, maybe 2 years, we were giving the DEXs time to ramp up, get used to Plutus v1, Plutus v2, and I think we're now at the stage in terms of maturity where we have smart contracts. Everybody understands sort of how to get them working, that we're now focusing on the user experience. And so to see you guys focusing on giving people the ability to customize, I think is a key piece of that. And of course, again, I think as just the space matures, we're going to continue to see more focus on enhanced user capabilities, which of course you guys are now kicking off here with your dashboard. So I definitely do appreciate that. I want to jump into, I think this is going to be our last topic here, which is
Yeah,
the liquidity manager that you actually just
yeah,
highlighted and teased out there a little bit. So would love to hear a little bit more about that and sort of what's coming down the pipes from VyFi's perspective.
absolutely. So just really quickly, before I hit on the liquidity manager, one thing that we're really proud about with the V3 DEX is that we're going to be implementing lots and lots of different order types, like limit orders, stop limits, OTO, which is order trigger order. So lots of lots trailing stop loss. That's the one I'm really proud of, because trailing stop losses are definitely missing. So V3 has given us the ability to put in a lot of order types. So I just wanted to quickly say that. But our liquidity manager is something that I have been talking about and I've been building out, and I'm so excited to finally have it pretty much here. So we're introducing 5, I guess you'd say, because we already have L2 LPs, but we're introducing 5 new liquidity types. And these 5 new liquidity types, they each have a name. I'm not going to list them all out here. It's just a list of names. But they're functionally multi-layered liquidity pools where you add LPs and tokens together to create yourself a unique risk structure. And some of these risk structures are really cool. So first of all, we've designed a front end to behave a lot like Lego. And it's actually going to be live on testnet, I would hope fairly soon, so people will be able to give their opinions on it and how it looks. But essentially, liquidity is Lego, right? You're stacking tokens on top of each other to create a liquidity pool. You know, I'm taking ADA here, stack it. I'm taking VyFi here, stacking it. Boom, now I've got an LP. Now in this corner, I'm going to take WMT here and then ADA here, stack it. Now I've got an LP. Now I've got these 2 LPs and I can snap them together. And now I've got a full layer 2 LP, right? Which is 2 liquidity pools snapped together. And this Lego structure essentially allows you to create your own bespoke risk profiles for your token portfolio. So the ones that let me give you an example. That one that I just described there is a great example. That's the full layer 2, which is 2 liquidity pool tokens that are put into liquidity with each other. And what's really interesting about the risk on this structure, and on the other side of the create liquidity screen, we're actually going to have this information available to players, including sliders the players are going to be able to play with, so they can compare, as in that example, for example, the price of WMT moves. How does the price of this liquidity structure move versus the price of just holding WMT by itself versus the price of holding the LP of WMT? So you can actually see the difference in risk that you're holding. We have that risk that's charted out in a graph so that you can actually see the graph and you can compare the 3 graphs, holding the token, the base LP, and then the layer 2 LP, how they compare to each other. And what's really cool about something like that one that I described, which would be VyFi ADA LP with WMT ADA LP, is that the impermanence risk of this pool doesn't actually move based on the value or the ratio of anything compared to ADA, right? That structure actually moves based on the price ratio between VyFi and WMT. So what that means is that you've now got yourself a structure that allows you to build a hedge against the price ratio of VyFi and WMT, right? As VyFi goes up, you're earning more Cardano. Against WMT, you're earning Cardano. As VyFi goes down against WMT, you're losing Cardano. But you're losing less Cardano than you would be if you held WMT by itself. Sorry, VyFi by itself. So now we've got essentially what in classic, in the traditional finance world, is called a proxy bet, right? So I can use this liquidity pool to create a position that's based on the ratio of any 2 tokens that I'm interested in. So I might be interested in Agix WMT or maybe SNEC CHAD, and I want to trade the change in value between SNEC and CHAD. And I think CHAD is going to go up a lot faster than SNEC because it's got a lot more room to grow. But I don't want to hold all my value in CHAD because that's too much risk. So what I can do is I can set it up in this SNEC CHAD liquidity pool. And now as CHAD goes up, you're making about 40% of the value of Chad going up, right? And you're making that value by earning SNEC and by earning Cardano.
Wow. Yeah, your expertise and your prior experience definitely beginning to show there with the proxy and the hedging. It's definitely something that I am still trying to get deeper into myself. I understand the concept, but I don't think that we've had anything like this in the ecosystem before. And so I think that education, right? And like obviously getting the feature out itself is one thing, right? But then educating people to let them know, to let them better understand, I think it's going to be just as important. That way they actually feel comfortable jumping in and using the tools. I think that that's one big thing that, within just the ecosystem as a whole, we have to do a better job of is with so much tech and so much innovation happening, we need to let people know how to use these products properly and how to use them efficiently. And so hopefully, I'm sure you guys will have some articles and blogs like you guys do with all of your other features that explain exactly how people can jump in, some of the pros, the cons, and, sort of the best cases or best times that they may want to lean on some of these brand new features there.
And it actually goes a bit deeper than that. I actually want to we're going to be doing videos of me actually building these out and explaining to people what this structure is. Because what's really interesting is that each of these structures have a very analogous position in traditional finance. Excuse me. And that's an analogous position, particularly in futures markets, where traders build layers of contracts on top of each other, and then they're essentially trading the difference between these contracts, right? And that's called spread trading. So if anyone's got experience with futures trading and spread trading, this should come very naturally to you. And I've designed it to essentially feel and look a lot like that. And exactly like you're saying, this means that we now need to take the time to educate the community and Cardano to explain to them, this is what spread trading is. This is how you can do it on a liquidity pool. And this is why it's used as the core mode of trading, as the core means of trading in traditional finance, right? Like people who are institutional investors don't really hold outright investments unless you're Robobank, but most people aren't Robobank. So unless you're Robobank and willing to go lose 200 billion in 6 months, you're not holding outright investments. You're holding spreads, right? Because sure, if everything goes to shit, I'm going to lose 60% of my portfolio, right? But at least I'm going to make up that other 40% because I've hedged it. So I would rather go to 40% than go to zero.
Yeah. I agree with you on that one as well. Again, I think strategy is going to be extremely important here and to let people understand, what are the risks and what are the pros there. And as you've laid it out there, it boils down to risk appetite and what people are willing to take, right? Because again, someone's risk profile may be different than the next. And I think that again, with these new tools, it's going to boil down to understanding what edge do you get versus the risk. And so as we get ready to wind things down here, Stephen, I always close out with closing thoughts, but maybe anything that is on the horizon that we haven't discussed, or maybe just a brief recap of what people can expect and when.
Yeah, let's definitely do a brief recap and then a few other little things on the horizon. So as a recap of what we spoke about, we got the safe swaps that are coming very soon. We're working with Daddy as the first implementation of that, but it is essentially going to be, as you said, a permissionless system. So anyone on the chain is going to be able to come to the SafeSwap page, set up a safe swap with anyone that they want on the blockchain, right, with any wallet, and essentially do safe OTCs. And then there's going to be the capacity for any project to import large-scale distributions and just let their community know, hey, you can go to VyFi right now and you're going to see the notification to claim your distribution. And again, the projects are going to get to decide how much of the fee that they want to cover. In other words, if they have to do large-scale 5,000 to 5,000 users distribution of Cardano, they don't have to pay 1.4 Cardano for every single airdrop now and spend 8,000 Cardano to get that distribution out. And as anyone who runs an ISPO or runs a project has experienced, that can be a painful experience. That's an expensive one. We're really pumped as well because that's going to be the first V3 contract on the Cardano blockchain, Plutus V3. And this means that we're going to have the first working live example of a Plutus V3 contract on Cardano. And I think when you see it in action, you guys are going to see how much power this contract provides with the capacity that we're able to do. You know, we can do large scale imports to a smart contract, for example, right? Like that's something that hasn't really been able to be done before. You know, I haven't been able to set up a large scale import of 400 wallets to create a distribution to those 400 wallets through a smart contract. That had to be done centrally. That can now be done on the blockchain. And this is such a leap forwards. I can't even begin to describe what a leap forwards this is for the blockchain to be able to do these things on the blockchain now, rather than having to find a partner that has a code base that they've built that lets you do a distribution that they might be willing to let you use because they used it once 3 years ago to do a distribution this time. And they don't know if it works anymore because there's been 4 hard forks since then. Right? Like that's generally how you need to find someone to do a distribution for you on Cardano at the moment.
That's not an easy task.
It's not. And I mean, Talos just put a tweet out about it a few days ago where he was like, is there seriously no one that can do a large scale distribution on Cardano? Like, does this not exist? Do I have to build it for myself? And we actually started talking with them, and we're hoping to be able to implement this and help them with it as well. Then of course we have our V3 DEX, which is going to be coming with, you know, the capacity to have a much more streamlined process and optimized code base, which allows us to implement a lot of features very quickly because of the way that we've now got the implementation of SIP85 and the way that we're able to slot things into our validators. And this also gives us the capacity to provide transactions cheaper to users because we've just got a far more optimized code base. I keep saying database, sorry. And then last but certainly not least, we're going to be having order types coming in. We're going to get our liquidity manager that's going to be launching. Soon after our liquidity manager, maybe not super soon, but probably Q2, we're going to get our NFT and farm mergers, which means people are going to start to be able to stake their NFTs against farms to boost their farms on those liquidity pools, and giving new value to our NFTs, because our NFTs have been they've had almost 1.6 million ADA traded on them. I feel like they deserve a bit of love. Then we've had, and then of course we've got our burn. That's another small one that I want to mention. We're burning, it looks like it's going to be half of our uncirculated supply, sort of in the next 2 to 3 weeks. That vote ends in 5 days, I believe. So that's going to give us so that's going to essentially mean that our FTV is going to be reducing by half. And the community wants to do this because they believe it's going to make it easier for future people coming in, seeing a lower FTV, to then get involved and start coming into the project. So that was the community's reasoning for making this burn happen. And that's all been done through our governance, right? So governance can make things happen. Let's just, it's real. And I feel like I've said so much and I still feel like I'm missing things, but I want to be respectful of your time and respectful of the listeners' time. But there's certainly a few other things in there as well.
Yeah, no, I'm always open to part twos here. On the channel, I realize again, there's a lot of information coming at people and trying to, as you said, be respectful of people's time, but then give them enough to be able to digest in one sitting, I think is very important here. So again, you obviously have my contact. I've got yours. I would not be surprised to see you here on the channel, especially as these things roll out. I'll, of course, make sure to provide updates to my community here through my news updates and news videos that I try to do here almost daily at this point. But that'll bring us here to the end. Of course. That'll bring us here to the end, ladies and gentlemen. We've got the Stephen Ward here representing VyFi. As he's highlighted, they're releasing the first ever Plutus V3 smart contract. Also expecting the launch of their SafeSwap feature, and then of course the rebrand there of their front end interface. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, first off, check out the description down below. I'm going to be leaving the links to everything VyFi down there. If you want to join their community, pick up any of their NFTs, get involved with governance, that's where you're going to find all the links. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comment section. If I'm not able to answer them myself, I'll make sure to get those over to Steven. And if you've appreciated this content, if you've learned anything as a part of today's video, please smash that thumbs up on the way out. Again, ladies and gentlemen, that'll bring us to the close here. We'll see you all in the next one. Take care for now. Bye-bye.